A wild week in Corvallis culminates with one of the Beavers' best performances of the season.
Nall's going to get there. Touchdown. Ryan Nall's third.
Corey Hall had his guys pumped up and ready to go. Our analysts grade Hall's performance as interim head coach.
With a flip back to Garrettson, and then the home run shot to Villeman. To the 10.
And the offense finally finds its groove with consistency and creativity. How do they keep it going for the remainder of the season? Talkin Beavers starts now. Research Stadium all quiet this weekend as the Beavers have their second bye week of the season before facing off against Stanford next week. A pretty good team to have some extra time to prepare for. Welcome into Talkin Beavers. Amanda Maynard, Jason John Baptiste, Lindsay Schnell, Evanston Bernard. We have everybody here today. First game, right?
Foursome. I love it.
So last week, first game under interim head coach Corey Hall. We're going to talk a little bit more about him later in the show, assess his performance, hear from him on some of the challenges that Saturday brought. But this was really one of the better, if I dare say, best performances we've seen from the Beavers all year? Okay.
Absolutely. Definitive, yes.
Fun to watch.
How surprised were you?
Well, to me, the most interesting thing is this team could have completely folded very easily. You know, it was a really emotional week. You dealt with Coach Anderson suddenly leaving, these text messages that come out that were not very supportive of the assistants. You know, kids are in a weird place mentally. So much credit to Corey Hall for coming up, for rallying them the way he did.
Well, the one thing I was going to say is that, like, to me, it was really, the vigor, the grit, the passion that was lacking when, Coach GA was there. They definitely presented with Corey Hall at the helm. I mean, you could see it from the outset, right? I mean, from the very beginning, they just play hard all throughout for 60 minutes, which was huge. I mean, that's the first time that we really see them be in the game for that long. So outside of the Portland State game, but it was pretty cool to see, for sure.
I mean, look at the total yards.
It was shocking. When you looked at the box score, like if you didn't look at the final score, you would have thought that they would have won. Also to own time of possession, a stat that has sort of haunted them this season.
And like you guys were mentioning, I mean, Oregon State had the edge in a number of statistical categories: total yards, first downs. Here's Corey Hall on why that unit was so effective.
The key to getting all that jump-started, the offensive productivity as far as the 560 total offensive yardage was, again, just getting back to the basics and running the football, right? Controlling the time of possession. I think we had the ball for, 30 minutes? And so, playing a physical brand of football. Any football game, I mean, that you got to establish the run, right? The objective is to stop the run and establish the run. And I felt that our guys, our staff did a great job of putting those players in a situation to be successful at doing so. And that's why you saw the result. I mean, you always got to control the line of scrimmage, right? You want to stay ahead of the chains. And so the coordinators, they came up with a great game plan, offensively and defensively, particularly on offense, that would allow for those players in that situation to control the clock and to control the line of scrimmage.
In our Les Schwab quick fix, this group certainly seems to have fixed the offense. The Beavers were a lot closer to Gary Anderson's ideal of a 60-40 run-pass split. 55% running plays to 45% pass plays. You can see the yards per play throughout the season there. Evanston, this group scored on all 5 first-half drives. It really felt like they've found their offensive identity.
Yeah, and Corey Hall is, it's so simple for him to say it, right? He goes, we just ran the ball.
Right, ran the ball.
It was so calm. He didn't reinvent the wheel. He just did what we all expected for Oregon State to do throughout the seasons: run the ball first and then throw the ball. And they executed, and you saw it, and it proved you were able to see what we were talking about the whole time.
Our producer pulled this great stat from the Beavers in the Gary Anderson era. When they rush the ball less than 40 times, they're 1-21. And the win was against Portland State, which we can all agree was not really a win. And when they have rushed the ball 40 or more times, they're 6-2. That does not include Colorado, because technically this isn't the Gary Anderson era anymore. But that just goes to show, Yeah, you establish the run. It's so simple. That's how they used to win at Oregon State, especially when you have a quarterback right now that is limited through the air like Garrettson is.
Well, you know, what's funny is that it's easy to run the ball when there's actually holes to run in.
Very true. Very true.
You know, so I mean, when you don't have holes to run in, it's very hard to run the ball. So this is one of the first games where they've actually opened up holes for Nall to run through, for AP, for Tyner, for a lot of these guys to really maximize their talents. Because if they're getting hit behind on the line of scrimmage, they can't do anything. Right. You know, so it's really hard for them to be able to get going when they have no place to go from the very beginning, from the outset.
And really kind of getting them the balls in different ways.
Yeah.
It seems like. I mean, what do you think about the creativity that we were seeing in the play calling?
I mean, Garrettson spread the ball to, what, 8 different receivers? I mean, that's impressive. And I want to go back. I know I'm backtracking here, but I think what happened is, well, I know what happened. Oregon State jumped out at first, right? And so we're not playing catch-up. That's why you're seeing us run the ball. That's why you saw us run the ball a little more. We weren't playing catch-up, and I think that's a big part. They had to jump out sooner, and that's what they did.
I just have to say that it's kind of interesting to me that just, you know, less than a week after these inflammatory texts come out, trashing the assistants, and I think a lot of people can kind of read between the lines and gather that he was very unhappy with the coordinators. McGibbon comes out, they have a good game plan, they run the ball, like you said, creativity. It was kind of a...
They wanted to prove something.
Yeah, exactly.
Here's the thing, like, I'm not a mathematician, but I like math. so I have a lesser opponent plus a reason for you to prove yourself equals what you saw on Saturday.
I do think that we're going to know a lot more going forward. That's not to take anything away from how good they were this week, but that's when it's easier when you're on this emotional high. You know, what's it going to be like when they play Stanford and
Corey Hall will keep them up emotionally.
All right. Well, later in the show, we're going to have plenty to talk about when it comes to Corey Hall, including does it have what it takes to lead this team till the end of the season? And after the break, a closer look at the defensive pressure the Beavs brought this week.
This will be the 10th play, 6-run, 3-pass. And now the direct snap to Nall, who racks his way right in for the Beaver touchdown. Here's the deep shot on play action. Nice diving catch. The deep shot by the Beavers. With a flip back to Garrettson. And then the home run shot to Villeman. To the 10. Through the pressure, Montez pulled the ball back, and Oregon State smothers them with Webu and Hugalu. Nall's going to get there. Touchdown. Ryan Nall's third. And the lead back to the Beavers.
Time now for our Wilson Motor Game Balls. Jason, let's start with you.
Yeah, my game ball goes to Ryan Nall. I mean, 24 carries, 172 yards, 3 touchdowns, 7.2 average per carry. I mean, this is the Nall that we've been all waiting for and eager to see, and he finally presented himself.
Garrettson got the ball around, controlled the game, didn't make any big-time, well, one big-time mistake, but it's all right, but I think he controlled the game pretty well.
You guys, as I learned from Remember the Titans, one of my favorite movies, attitude reflects leadership. And the leadership this week out of Corey Hall was great. I'm really impressed with how Oregon State played, that they played with so much energy, had them together, and they all seem to be playing for each other, and that was huge.
So much focus on the offense. How about the defense? Oregon State recording 2 sacks against Steven Montez. It seems like they were getting some pressure on him. How have you seen this defense get better over the last several weeks?
Well, I mean, it's funny because we just talked about it a little bit off camera. Like, I think Manasseh Hungalu is playing these last 2 games probably the best football that he's played in his career. I mean, he had 11 tackles this game, had a sack. So, I mean, he's playing really well. I think they're feeding off of him. You know, you could tell in the first half that Montez wasn't really, you know, he couldn't get into a rhythm. They were pressuring him. There's people at his feet. He felt pressured. And because of that, they didn't really move the ball that well. So the defense is playing really well. I mean, the second half was a different story, but in the first half, you know, they played pretty well, if you ask me.
Yeah.
And I mean, they had some solid drives that they put together, but of course, then every once in a while, Philip Lindsay busts out a
plays.
That's how
Big
good
plays.
Yeah,
Big plays.
Yeah, he's a special player, that kid, you know, and
a veteran.
Yeah, and a veteran, yeah, for sure.
So, but as you're getting ready to face a guy like Bryce Love, who can do that.
You guys, I just saw Bryce.
Honestly, I don't think you really change up. You don't change up your game plan as much just because you know they're going to run the ball. They knew Colorado's going to run the ball. They have, obviously, Bryce Love is a great running back. Lindsey's a great running back. So I don't think you basically prepare how you prepared last week.
What is kind of the overall state of the run defense, you feel like,
Well,
at this point?
I think, you know, okay, here's the thing, is that the second half continues to be like a thorn in the side for them because, you know, it seems like they get worn down. In the first half, they did a pretty good job of bottling up Lindsey in the first half. In the second half was a different story. He had that really long run in the first half, the 74-yarder. But outside of that, like, they really bottled him up. In the second half, they started to get worn down. Lindsey started finding a little bit more running room. So they just have a hard time just maintaining that throughout the whole course of the game. But I think, you know, as long as they're able to somewhat bottle up, you know, Bryce Love and some of these other backs that are coming up, they'll be okay. As long as the offense could put some points on the board.
I keep thinking we're talking about me, for the record. I'm running that well against
Yeah.
It's not going to happen.
You have just as good hair, though. I will
Thank
say.
you. I appreciate that, Amanda.
Especially today. It looks really,
Right?
it looks really nice, yeah.
All right, well, still to come, Mike Parker joins us to discuss Corey Hall's first game as interim head coach. And coming up next, we're breaking down our headlines of the week with Lindsey, a new AD at Nebraska. What is next for Mike Riley and Mike Leach? Time now for our standard TV and appliance headlines with our veteran reporter, Lindsey Schnell of USA Today. And we're starting by talking a little football news, and it involves some health-related issues, right?
Yeah, so if you watched the game on Saturday against Colorado, maybe you noticed when Seth Collins was greeting his teammates wearing a hospital robe. Very bizarre. Collins did not play against Colorado, and Oregon State announced this week that he is out indefinitely with a, quote, health-related issue. Now, they've said that it is not related to his sickness at the end of last season when Collins has told reporters he was, quote, on his deathbed at one point. And at this point, they are exploring the possibility of potentially redshirting him this season. The redshirt rule, to qualify for a medical redshirt, you have to have played in less than 30% of the team's games. Well, he has only played in 25% of the games because he missed the first 3 games of the season, as everyone remembers. So we're going to talk about this more about the impact, but in the immediate, that came out of nowhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, our second one, good news for the volleyball team.
Yes, okay, so just a couple weeks after we had said, you know, that all the fall sports teams were struggling, the volleyball team goes up to the Washington schools over the weekend and sweeps the Washington schools for the first time since 1990.
Wow.
It was their first sweep as a program since 2011. They did that against Colorado and Utah a few years ago. And then they sweep the Pac-12 Player of the Week awards. Outside hitter Mary Kate Marshall was named Offensive Player of the Week. Grace Massey, a libero, was named Defensive Player of the Week. And then Maddie Goings was named the Freshman Player of the Week. Marshall had 25 kills against UW and 8 of them in the 5th and final set. So they won both. They won both matches 3-2. Big win for them. You know, the Pac-12 is routinely the toughest conference in college volleyball, so very impressive. And now they're home to host the Arizona schools.
All right, and then back to football. More Pac-12 kind of moves going on.
Amanda, this was maybe the weirdest week in the Pac-12 in years. And then the strangest news actually came Monday when Bill Moose of Washington State was announced as the new athletic director at Nebraska. Now, earlier this season, Sean Eichhorst, the man that hired Mike Riley, was fired kind of suddenly, and lots of people were in the mix. No one really expected Moose, but he talked a little bit about why he decided to go there.
It's always been my view professionally that when someone is looking at another job, another position, that they're either running away from something or running to something. And believe me, I have nothing to run away from, but wholeheartedly wanted to run to this job.
So that was bizarre. Like I said, just a couple weeks ago, Moose was in Eugene, his old place of business, because he worked at U of O forever. And I talked with him a little bit about the success Washington State was having, what they had built. He felt in this great place. So we're going to talk more about the long-term impact of this. But right away, Moose said he's not going to fire a coach midseason. So Riley's job is at least safe through the end of the year.
Now. Oregon State, looking for
different.
a new coach.
Probably not going to happen.
Right?
But
You never
different.
know.
And then Leach has said that Leach, who was as blindsided as anyone by Moose's move, has said he wants input on the next AD.
All right, thanks so much, Lindsay. Much more to come here on the show. Our best damn bracket continues later in the show. Who wins between Bill Swancutt and Stephen Paya? But first, Mike Parker weighs in on Corey Hall. Oregon State now embarks on their second bye week of the season before facing Stanford next Thursday. Still to come, Mike Parker joining the show. He has some interesting thoughts on why this Beavers offense is finally clicking. Plus, we reveal the winner of this week's Damn Best matchup and what is going on the Palouse. Stick around. So as Lindsay and I were just discussing, Seth Collins out last week with a health-related issue, out indefinitely. Lindsay, what are some of the things that we're hearing around Seth Collins?
Well, first of all, I really want to know, is he just going to wear the robe like every day on campus? Like showing up to practice and his
Hey, can I ask a question about that? Who in their right mind told him that was okay? Like,
no, Seth's a different cat.
Yeah,
I mean, did no one tell him, like, listen, you might not want to go outside
It
looking
was a
like that.
rough week, okay? That's like the least of their problems.
Anything goes.
Oh, shit. Gotta love
Comedy Central.
Different
So,
swag.
I mean, basically what I said, we know it's a health issue. It's not related to last year. He was very, very sick last year. So I'm guessing he's going to redshirt. Like, I would say that if they are saying that up front, that's being talked about. And Garrettson spoke at practice this week and made it sound like he said something about, man, it's just awful to lose Seth. I love that kid. Was very much talking like this is a permanent rest of the season thing. And you guys, I think that's a huge loss for them because he brings, as Nigel likes to say, the junkyard dog thing and a lot of competitiveness and energy. He's still developing as a receiver, but I think it's like they just can't catch a break.
Right?
Hey, the one thing I was going to say about that, though, is that if he does redshirt and he comes back next year, you figure he comes back, Luton comes back if he ends up playing again. So you do have something like building there. So it might be, I mean, I know that it's a loss for this year, but next year you have potential.
If they hire Ken Niumatalolo from Navy, who runs the option, like then we're going to have a completely different discussion, It'll be really fascinating whoever they hire. Do they do what GA did and coming in and we're going to, remodel this?
This whole thing.
Or are they going to say, okay, this is what we have to work with? Because that's a good point. They should bring some experience back.
Yeah, when you can get another play like that back for another year, I mean, that's huge.
Yeah, it pays dividends, especially with this incoming recruiting class, too. If they're able to have somewhat of a good recruiting class, you have someone that is another senior authority figure that kind of helps with the locker room and is able to help manage some of these guys and show them the ropes and stuff like that. So which is huge, locker room wise.
Well, certainly it was a tumultuous week for Corey Hall that thrust him into the spotlight, being named interim head coach just over a week ago after Gary Anderson resigned from that post. He tells us what has been the biggest challenge for him so far in our Best Foot Forward, brought to you by the Good Feet Store.
Just the amount of time that I would be able to spend with my specific position group. The offense was on the field, and I remember there was a point in time in the game that I needed to make an adjustment. I wanted to make an adjustment with the corners, and I believe the offense needed to know when I would want to take a timeout, and I had my headset off. And I remember Coach Nyborg comes over. He's like, "Coach, you got to get over there. You put your headset on." And the offense is talking. It's like, you kind of lose that for a moment and realize that, okay, I have to manage this game still. Although, like I said, that was probably the only time or period and point in there that I was unable, to do it right then and there, which it didn't cost us. We didn't need the timeout. They just wanted to understand the situation and what I would want there. So that, and then just the day-to-day, the minutia of, having to manage an entire team, and as far as the game plan now, you know, given the details of a new assignment and not being as involved as I was prior in the defensive game planning, you know, or just sitting in there and really dissecting the opponent.
We can tell he certainly brings energy. What are some of the other first impressions you have of him?
Well, it's funny because, like, you know, one of the first things that strikes me is that he's a young guy.
Yeah.
You know, so he's relatable to the players, which is key and important for these players that need some direction, needs to be energized with the week that they just had, their coach leaving them. So someone like him who brings that energy, brings that passion, automatically you kind of, you know, that trickles down to the players. So he has that, obviously, as you see on the sideline. So that is beneficial to everyone involved, not just the players, but the coaches too.
I also think that the youth, and you two could speak to this much more than I can, but when Keith Hayward went to UW, left Mike Riley's staff, that was a big loss because they did not have a young African-American on staff. And then when Trent Bray came in under Riley as the linebackers coach, obviously that was good to get some youth, and the players loved Bray, but I think having a young person of color, that's really important. And you know, it's crazy, like, we didn't even have that discussion last week about that Hall is now one of a very small handful of black head coaches in college football, but I think that's big for the guys, and we've had a lot of conversations off camera about whoever comes in, will they retain Hall? Will they try to keep him on staff? Will he get a better opportunity?
Hey,
all
Lindsay,
those things.
I like that. You went there.
Are you inferring that Corvallis is not diverse?
Joking.
No, but I will say one thing. Lindsay, you touching that point is really important, and it's very hard for people to go down that path, and you're exactly right. When you got Corey Hall or Keith Hayward Johnson going down to L.A. or a school in Texas, they can walk into that living room and talk to those parents and that kid a lot easier. It's a lot easier for them, right?
100%.
It's tougher. So I appreciate you going there because that's truth, and a lot of people will not say that.
I've told you guys, right, the story about Sammy Stratter told me one time, I said, you know, what's it like to be here as an African-American in this very white town? And he said, they tricked me. I woke up in the morning and everyone was white.
Did I tell you about my recruiting trip here?
No, but
oh my God, it's so fun. Okay, so I came during winter break, so there's no one here except for the football team. So we went to the park. There's like no one in town at all. No one was here. So I came back after I had signed my letter of intent. I came back and I was like, wait, like what is this? Like this is not what I had in my mind. So I mean, like they do that. They know what they're doing.
My story is a little different. Coming from Boca Raton, Florida, it's a suburb of Florida, so it wasn't much different for me. But obviously, you know, talking to teammates, they had, you know, it was tough for them.
Yeah.
Well, and obviously a rough transition made seamless by Corey Hall. Here's what he had to say about trying to make the transition from Anderson to himself smooth.
You know what, just the energy. Not only the energy is just, you know, kind of slow things down, add more practice periods so that the learning can ensue. Because, I mean, I went and I spoke with each individual coach. I spoke with each individual, a lot of players, you know, in clusters, and kind of just picked their brains and wanted to understand and get a sense for what would be beneficial to them in this time of transition, as far as practice, as far as how we travel. You know, I mean, I asked them every question from A to Z, just so I can make minor tweaks here and there to help them moving forward. You know, just because I know it's not hard, right? You have a new captain of a ship, so you have to poll your audience. You know, you have to poll the people that you're now leading to find out what's going to be beneficial to them to get them to produce the way that they need to.
That's got to be, I'm sure, incredibly important to get the feedback from the players who are going through this rough transition. What are we learning about Oregon State under Coach Hall?
I mean, so much.
Yeah, I think the players forgot about Monday, to be honest with you. After that game on Saturday, I don't think they really were thinking about it. And I don't even think they're thinking about it now from this point on.
Yeah.
This will be a weird week, you know, with the bye week, they have a lot of time on their hands. You know, before a lot of guys stayed in town that weekend. Will more of them go home? Like I said, it's great that they played as well as they did against Colorado, but I think we're going to know more about them going forward now against Stanford is very, very good. So if Stanford beats the living daylights out of them, I don't think you can take much away from that. I think it's going to be more about what's going on with Arizona and Arizona State and all that.
Yeah, and one of the things for the players too is that as a former player, and Everson could speak to this too, is that you get a lot of energy based upon like what the fan base is, how much energy they have. And that field and that stadium on Saturday was the most lively and most energetic of the whole year. So
Night and day.
I think there's kind of an attitude of like, you don't want us, well, we don't want you. To be honest, I think that was how some people reacted to Anderson leaving. Like, you don't think we're good enough here? Well, we're gonna prove to you we are.
Yeah.
All right, coming up, we're unveiling our newest matchup in our damn best bracket. And up next, Mike Parker joining us to talk about his impressions of Corey Hall as head coach. Back here on Talkin Beavers, and for the first time all year, the Beavers offense looked awfully efficient. They scored on every one of their first half drives. That changed a little bit in the second half. They scored on 2 of their 5 drives, but those 2 were both touchdowns. And it's our Toyota of Portland tune-up with Mike Parker. And Mike, we've been discussing Corey Hall's first game as interim head coach. What were your impressions of how he did?
Well, from the moment that just before the game and the sun burst through what had been a foggy day, he put his hands up in the air and closed his eyes. And I asked him later about that, and he just said he was thanking God for the moment and wanted to live and be in the moment with his players. And that was evident as he moved up and down the sideline. It looked as though he got at some point to almost every player during the game about something. That energy was palpable for all of his coaches, for all the players, I think for the fans in the stands. I think they enjoyed watching that. And Ryan Nall, of course, who has done some great things in his Oregon State career, was asked, and we had a chance to ask him just about maybe a little difference, game day demeanor between Gary Anderson and Corey Hall.
You know, obviously Coach Hall is a very expressive, energetic kind of guy. You know, Coach A is probably a little bit more reserved. He brings the fire, definitely. You know, he's got energy as well, but Coach Hall will stay jumping the entire game no matter what. And I think that, you know, that rubbed off on a lot of guys, and we're able to, you know, find that motivation to continue to fight, and, you know, then it just comes down to execution. So how key.
Clearly, Ryan knows that Gary had a tremendous amount of fire, no doubt about that. But the way that Corey expressed all of that in a week that had been so tumultuous, I think, Amanda, was really important for Corey to have that personal, engaged, upbeat, ebullient kind of touch with all of his players.
You know, Mike, this offense looked the best it has all year. Why do you feel like it was working?
Yeah, it's interesting. I talked to Kevin McGivern, the offensive coordinator, about the explosion plays, about all of the things the Beavers did and the variety of formations, the wildcat snap. Ryan Nall scores on one of them, the reverse pass with Darryl Garrettson. There was a creative, almost exotic mix in there. But he did say, and I give Kevin credit, and he's right, if you go back and look at the tape against USC, particularly in the second half, the Beavers did have some big hits and some creative formations, some different things in the run game, toss sweeps to the boundary, things that we saw in USC that actually took better shape against a defense in Colorado that was a little more yielding than some of the other units the Beavers have gone up against. But just there was a crispness, a creative feel and flair to the offense that we hadn't seen. But Coach McGivern will tell you a lot of that has been a work in progress they've been meaning to get to all year long.
And there was a notable piece missing, Mike, on the offense. Seth Collins out, they said, indefinitely with a health-related issue. What are we hearing about Seth Collins?
Yeah. Well, it's too bad, too, because as I mentioned, that USC game, that second half in particular with Seth was a breakout half for him. He was making plays and looking like the difference maker that Gary Anderson always described Seth Collins as. It is a week-to-week health issue. We have been told, and the very fact we've been told this means that week-to-week could extend, perhaps even through the rest of the year. If it does, Seth Collins still has the ability to get a medical redshirt and would have 2 years of eligibility. It's too bad. This kid's been through so much, it's almost impossible to account for, and he was just growing into a bigger role in the offense. So it's a big loss week to week or the rest of the year, whatever plays out.
So, Mike, back to Corey Hall. I know we were talking about it being maybe a Clay Helton type situation, going from the interim head coach, doing enough to win the job. So what will it take for Corey Hall to maybe be the next head coach of Oregon State?
You know, the thing I like best about this question is when he's been asked, he said, I'm not giving that a second thought. Now, some may say that's disingenuous. Of course, he's thinking about running the table and being named the guy. I really believe him, though, when he says right now his job is just to put his arms around the players, to love on them, to give them game plans that they can execute, to get the staff working and functioning cohesively. I think he's the perfect guy, and he's already shown the ability to bring a lot of people together for the common purpose. Having said all of that, I think if he looks up at the end, if we all look up together at the end, and he's won 2 or 3 games against a schedule now. Early in the year, people were saying, hey, the back end of the schedule's kinder. Well, look what Arizona and Arizona State have done. Suddenly they look better. Cal with their great win. I'm not sure the second half of the schedule is going to be any lighter than the first. So if Coach Hall is looking at 2 or 3 wins, competitive games, each game out, then he's put himself in that conversation.
Pac-12 is a tough place to play, Mike. Thank you, as always. Well, some leadership shakeups in the Pac-12, what Washington State's athletic director departure may mean for Mike Riley at Nebraska. And up next, back to our damn best bracket. We're debating the best players in Oregon State history. Stick around. Plenty of Oregon State coverage for you each and every week here on NBC Sports Northwest. Inside the Huddle airs Thursday at 9 p.m. with a special guest, Mark Banker. And then we'll be back here next Wednesday with another edition of Talkin Beavers at 7 p.m. In our Comcast Business Class Built for Business, we are looking to crown the top performance in Oregon State football history in our damn best bracket. Now, for the defensive showdown this week, it was Bill Swancutt versus Stephen Paya. Very tough. Let's see who the winner is. And it was Bill Swancutt. I feel like no one is surprised by this one, right? Also, that's probably, again, the most overwhelming vote we've had, almost 70% to 30%. Do you think that one's fair?
Yeah, I mean,
any arguments for Paya?
No, well, no.
Okay, well, then I guess we can move on now.
I'm a Swancutt guy. So
I mean,
we played with him.
Yeah, he's from Oregon. I mean, what else?
Yeah, but that's not the only reason.
Yeah,
I mean, he was effective for 4 straight years.
So, okay.
No one's beaten Jordan.
I'll let us. So the one thing I'll say is that last week I said that his nickname was Shrek when I played with him, right? So I would be remiss if I didn't tell people what my nickname was when I played.
Oh yeah, we would love to hear that.
So people can laugh at me too. Okay?
Yeah, okay.
So my nickname when I played was Predator. And the
Predator.
Reason,
I feel like that's not as bad as Shrek, though. I mean, Predator.
No.
You gotta know why.
Because I had locks.
Yeah.
And Predator will always shake.
That's amazing. All right. Okay. On to our offensive matchup. Terry Baker versus Sean Mannion. I want to hear somebody's argument for why Terry Baker should win.
Duh, Heisman.
Yeah.
That's it. Okay.
One Heisman Trophy at Oregon State.
Yeah, Oregon State only has one Heisman winner, and it's Terry Baker. So how does he lose?
So no one's going to beat him? Is this just over at this point?
So
and a dual athlete as well, played basketball.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
A really good basketball player.
Okay, can someone make an argument for Sean Mannion
I'll make the argument for Mannion.
All right.
So here's the argument for Mannion. He manned the most prolific offensive output and air raid that Oregon State's ever seen. I mean, he had both, Brandon Cooks on his team. Yeah, Wheaton on the team. They've never been that good passing the ball. Yeah. So there you go. But he's not going to win.
Yeah, but we already know who's going to win. And it seems like Terry Baker, I mean, we have a long way to go in this offensive bracket, but you think Terry Baker's going to sweep everybody? Is that
You guys, I still can't believe the Rogers brothers lost.
And you missed it.
There were 2 of them.
Defend their honor.
And I think I got a text from both of them like 2 days later, and I did not bring anything up about that.
Yeah, that's probably.
I didn't tell them I voted for Kev.
Oh, man.
Wow.
All right, well, make sure to hop on and vote on our Facebook page, facebook.com/NBCS Northwest. Real quick, returning to the current state of the team, something we talked a lot about was the secondary, in that it felt like every Pac-12 receiver was having career games when they went up against these guys. What did you see? Still, exactly. So Bryce Bobo, again, 9 for 126 yards, 2 touchdowns. I know they're banged up, but what can we expect from this group moving forward?
I mean,
Everybody
Win is due for a career game, I think.
yeah, I mean, you know, the truth of the matter is that I hope that changes, and I hope that, you know, they could secure a lot of these, you know, receivers that are just breaking out. I mean, and it's funny because we kind of talked about offline during the game is that everyone and their mama knew who the ball was going to. Like anytime, you know, you step back, Montez would step back and pass, and it was Bobo, and he still couldn't stop him. Now, I don't know what you do. Like I had said before, like I think maybe zone coverage, maybe you blitz more, you know, to get the ball out of the quarterback's hands, but none of it is working. So I don't know.
Yeah, D-line gets some pressure on the quarterback, right?
Makes everything different.
Exactly.
All right, more to come here on the show, but right now Evanston is getting ready for the game at the OSU Beaver store.
I'm here at the OSU Beaver store on campus. Check out my awesome PJs that I'm rocking. The family can also wear some matching PJs for the holiday season around the fire, drinking some hot cocoa. It's a great look. And then you have the socks, the different varieties, different colors for great stocking stuffers for the family. Get your holiday gear and more at the OSU Beaver store. Fans start here.
Of course, we just had to show this guy looking so good. Again, in his pajamas.
Thanks.
Ed, he's just like, I love, you're just, you're Beavers through and through all the time.
but you
That's
know what?
admirable.
Oh, power to it, because you weren't in your bathrobe.
Hey, you're right. That is right. That is right. Well, you know, you got to do what you got to do for Oregon State. You know?
Absolutely. All right, so all season long we've been praising the Pac-12 North, but this weekend all four Northwest schools go winless. Oregon, of course, loses big to Stanford. Cal shocking Washington State. Arizona upsetting Washington. What's going on?
So this is the first time that all four Northwest schools have lost since 2007. Probably the Pac-12 just played itself out of the college football playoff because that's a horrible loss for Washington. And their field goal kicker was brutal. He missed 21 yards and 27 yards. Cal was really surprising, but also Cal has played really well at times, although turning the ball over, was it 17 times? Like, that's a real number. That's how many times Washington State turned the ball over. Well, Oregon looked terrible, but they don't.
Also, Lindsay, I will never forget the day you told me, it might have been like 3 weeks ago, the Pac-12 is better than it was in 2006. I don't think so.
Oh. Okay, I might be wrong now. Hey,
You're going to make her eat those words.
Yeah, because I was like, hold on. I mean, the USC was USC back then. UCLA was UCLA.
Well, and the biggest thing now is what's going to happen with Washington State with Moose gone? You know, is Leach going to stay? Like, I think there's going to be a few openings. Probably Texas A&M is going to be open. Probably Tennessee is going to be open. I think there's a good chance ASU is going to be open. What are going to be the coaching carousel dominoes that fall? Moose leaving Washington State, in my opinion, is one of the best things that could happen to OSU because that's the program that they're most comparable to. So now if they're destabilized, maybe this is a chance to settle in.
Although I did see that Barnes' name was, I mean, of course, it's all just all potential.
Don't even start.
Okay, I'll say this on air.
His name was out there.
If Scott Barnes is the AD here in a year, I'll be shocked because Barnes came for Anderson.
Sure.
Like, and 2 weeks after Barnes gets on campus, the baseball thing happens, which was a PR disaster, and now this. I would kill to be like his therapist right now.
I don't
know his true thoughts.
I don't even want to think about that one. That would obviously working closely with a lot of donors. Nope, let's not even go there. But the thing about Moose, let's go back up a little bit. When he said you run to this job, as a Washington State Cougar, that's a little bit of disrespect in my eyes.
Well, there's a lot of
very strange.
There's a lot of reports that there was a lot of tension between him and the school president. So,
I mean, you know, truth be told, Nebraska is a more prestigious position.
Yeah, those are one of the things you don't say though. You know, like, I'm leaving.
Yeah, I mean, you don't.
Very eager to get away from here.
You don't say that. You know, I mean, to be running from Pullman to Omaha. I mean, it's not like come on, it's Omaha.
Right.
It's not like you're going to LA. Come on, man. You know, obviously you must not talk to a lot of people. I mean, it's like places that don't have.
A few more flights you can get in and out.
There's my dude right there, Mike Riley.
And there was James Rogers.
And what do you feel like this means for Mike Riley? Obviously, Moose is the one that brought in Mike Leach.
Leach is not gonna go to Nebraska.
Okay.
That wouldn't, as Ev pointed out off camera, that is a school that wants to run the ball. They're gonna want nothing to do with his air raid.
Yeah.
Riley's probably losing his job. That was pretty clear when they fired Sean Eichhorst. So then, what do you guys think? Mike Riley Part 3 in Corvallis?
I don't think so. I think
as much as I love Riley, I don't know. I don't think that's the right fit.
They need to go in a different direction.
Yeah.
I mean, we've done the Raleigh thing.
You know, I was just going to say, a good friend of mine who's an Oregon State fan said last night, we were talking on the phone, he said, you know, we need to prove that someone else can win here.
Yeah.
That it's not just Riley.
Yeah.
Sure.
Right.
So, who do you guys think is going to be the next head coach?
I think there's some quality guys out there. Obviously, a lot of people.
You kind of like some the same people.
Obviously, every Beaver and former player is going to want to go with Jonathan Smith, right?
I do not think that is the answer.
I know. Or Bo Baldwin, Frost. I mean, there's names out there, but I'm not the decision
Scott Frost is
maker.
not taking this job.
And Lindsay, you have a couple
Defending
of
Nebraska.
top to-dos for the first, when this person takes over, right?
Yeah, so I think the most important thing, whoever they hire, is going to be convincing Ryan Nall and Noah Togiai, who are both going to be draft eligible, to stick around. Similar to when Taggart got to Eugene, the most important thing he did was recruit Royce Freeman to stay. Other names that have come up, you know, I've said Bronco Mendenhall. Of course, Bo Baldwin, I think, would be a great hire. Alex Grinch, the Washington State DC. Mike Norvell, who's currently the coach at Memphis, used to be the ASU offensive coordinator. The biggest thing, hire someone that is not going to shock all of us. When they shock people, it tends to go badly, and not just with Gary Anderson.
All right,
Greg
real
Robinson,
quick, Jason, you have a shout-out to one of our loyal fans.
I just want to give a quick shout-out to Ted Wynn, who's in the fight of his life right now, diagnosed with terminal brain cancer, a die-hard Beaver believer, truly bleeds black and orange. Wanted to let him know just to continue fighting on, fight the good fight, go fight, and win against this terrible disease that's
Absolutely.
consuming lives.
Have a good one.
Awesome.